Alrighty, here we go. I got another chance to talk to Bianca Grace, the very talented, extremely intelligent, wise, experienced psychoanalyst, psychotherapist. She is a counselor. She deals a lot with codependency. She deals a lot with couples and relationships and masculinity and femininity. And we talked specifically about fatherhood and fatherhood voids. It was an awesome conversation. I was up north again, so I wasn't able to get great sound and video quality, but she sounded great, looked great, of course. I'm excited to bring you the conversation. Hope this helps you somehow to get your shit together.
Hey, how are you? Hey, Travis, I'm good.
Good, yeah. How's life today?
It's going along. It's cloudy here, so it's kind of a gray day.
Cloudy where I am too, and it's cold. It's 34 degrees here, so hence the hat. Yeah. I'm at my, I have a different house that's smaller and in the middle of the woods, and I just got here an hour ago, and it isn't warm yet, so I'm waiting for the fireplace to heat up. So in the meantime, I'm wearing a hat.
Nice. That's actually, yeah, that's a good idea. I get you. It must be, actually, that's like one of the things that you have a place out somewhere so you can just get away from it all, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It's some family. It's been in the family for a few generations, and when I was in my 20s and ambitious, I built a little cabin back here, and now it's my escape. I come here just to hang out any time of year, and it's not, it shouldn't be this cold this late into April. We should be looking at 50s, and it's not.
Yeah, I know. The spring is a teaser. It's rough. It's rough to bet on. But I think that one of the things that we kind of reconvened to talk about, and I know that we were thinking about talking a little bit about single fathers, but the idea of, but that's actually right in alignment with a rite of passage into manhood. And it does seem like, I have some insight into where men are and women, as far as how aware they are of what is to come, what's to come in the adult world, and how they're kind of thinking of it, because neither one of them are actually prepared, to really live their own life. But I think they have more of a model, being at home, having they're just more of a model for it that is really difficult to take away from a woman. Like, you can't, you are going to have a baby because this is how this works for you. And so there's a lot of, there's just a lot of, okay, got it. But not necessarily for men. That's not the case at all. So
I agree.
And I wanted to see too how this related to your book as well. So tell me a little bit more about, exactly how, what you see going on, and then also too what you feel like has happened, as far as your book is related. How is this something that they would read in order to maybe get on this path?
Yeah, there's definitely a strong connection there. So we can start from the beginning. I think, and we said this before, that you mentioned it, that women generally are, and I'll say it this way, biologically, are going to figure out womanhood. You're going to have these hormones and emotions that are going to kind of guide you down the path of being a mother and these sorts of things. And it's less socially rooted. Whereas for a boy to become a man, he's got to see role models doing it right, and even have, some very prescriptive, affective role models coming to him and telling him, hey, this is what is expected of you. This is what you're supposed to do. There are so many different pieces there that are missing. So, and I think that what we're seeing now is a lot of boys who, for lack of a better term become that Peter Pan, right? So they never really learned what is that their expectations shift at some point, right? The things that are expected of you as a child are one set of dynamics, and there really is no shift or obvious point where you have to start acting different or being different, or there's no point where people start treating you differently. Not really, especially if you go the a college route. There's no rite of passage. There's no point where a boy is told, after this point, I'm expecting you to act differently and be differently, and we're going to treat you differently too. That's the key. That's that rite of passage you're talking about, and we certainly are lacking it. And I would tell you, my book is a reaction to that. My book is
Okay.
instructions for those who never had that, and as a result are struggling to make it in an adult world and try to figure out what it is to be a man.
Yeah, I think figuring out what it is to be a man and really coming into conflict with, like what you said. I work with young adults often, being in Boston, and most of my, my clients that are men experience a lot of disappointment, disillusionment, feeling like they're completely they're out of their own league, like meaning like they feel competitive, like they have all these sets of ideas about what it is that they could expect from the world that are now being utterly frustrated.
Oh yeah.
And right, and that is, you know it's fine to have a little bit of that, to be honest, but having so much, like, these kids are really, like, they're really struggling emotionally with, like, finding out there's no Santa Claus at age
Yeah.
22.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh my God, I'm like crying and shaking, like I can't deal with this. So you
Yeah.
kind of,
It makes
it
perfect
looked like,
sense.
yeah. What makes what that is something to do with what, how we're saying something about, there has to be something with parenting and how the parents are saying basically, they're not helping them out in some way understand what's reality. They just keep on pumping them up with the world is your oyster language.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about it like you put it too with school. You're right, the environment's not changing, and it's like they're being born into the world after being like in an academic system, always telling them what to do and how to be rewarded way late in life.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I
That's
also think that, yeah,
it's
not
just
having
it's
that exposure is important to address.
no doubt about it. Yeah, I feel for him, very frankly. It's a situation where you develop that sense of normal early on. Hey, this is what's worked for me, and these are the things, these are the behaviors that have drawn the positive feedback that I'm looking for in the past,
Right.
and I've got no reason to not stop doing that. But then suddenly, they reach your stage where you're talking to them, and they're 22 or 25 or 28, and they're still
Right.
doing the same stuff they've always done, and they wonder it's why things aren't working the way that they were told they're supposed to. Like that whole idea of, yeah, the world is your oyster. I think that's a direct result of I was a teacher for a long time, and we always called it middle school philosophy, but really it's this focus on self-esteem, and that's that no matter what, we can't hurt anybody's feelings essentially. And that's it's just a crime. You're crushing these people because you got to learn how to deal with failure. You're going to have your feelings hurt in the real world. And if you get to adulthood and now all those habits are, as I was talking about, cemented in you,
Mm-hmm.
now you're going to really fail if that stuff doesn't work in the real world. It's everybody's. I think parents are caught up in trying to prepare the road for the child instead of preparing the child for the road. And you did do a little bit more of that. I think it's gonna behoove the kid. I always, like I said, when I was a teacher, I loved it when kids failed in my class. I don't mean failed the class, but made mistakes, fell on their face. You know what I mean? Did those sorts of things because man, I'd so much rather it be here where I can help guide you through it and give you some ideas on how it is to be. Here's how you deal with failure. I mean, who in the adult world is not going to agree that dealing with failure is kind of important? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like you got to be able to do that, and you got to practice it, and you got to practice from a young age. And these parents want to, that's where the participation medals come in, and hey, well, we don't, you failed, but we're not going to let you know it. We're not going to let you think you failed, and really, you're handicapping your kid. And I think that's the kind of kid that you're running into, that's struggling as an adult.
Yeah, and I think that this is the part where when we don't have anything but our parents to really emotionally guide us through life, and our parents are, can't hurt anybody's feelings, maybe, they're in that side too. I think discipline, how to launch, how to really shape the experience of your child to be one that is, I mean, because you are shaping it. They don't, they're
Yeah,
like, okay, we'll just kind of hands off, and we'll get them to participate in all these things around them and hope that all those things inform them. But we're really pretty much hands off. So it's like we were, hands on, and they're like, okay, so don't hit the kids. Okay, that makes sense. Or
it's
abuse.
obvious.
But
Yeah,
yeah, clearly, but total hands off approach, and kind of whatever, subcontracting out your parenting to all these other like
Yeah.
teachers and sports and this and that. It doesn't do it either. And what happens is the parent loses some amount, I think, too, of emotional resiliency. They're not informed about, like, they don't understand themselves emotionally enough to help a child that is challenged, is failing, is going through something negative, is obstinate. Kids are born, I like to say, like emotionally raw.
Yep.
They
You,
come out
you mold them.
right.
Yep.
They come out crying, and they're a ball of emotions. And why do we get men without totally detached from their emotions when they were born with a whole set of them?
Yep.
That there's something that happened along the way. And a lot of it has to do with the parent refusing to be a container for the boys. I would say I'm kind of going towards not just aggression, because I don't think the boy is really experiencing that, wanting to be directly, but he's stronger emotionally, like he has stronger expressions, ADHD kind of stuff, rambunctious, right? All the things that we're pathologizing now are kind of
Which is the
normal
same.
boy behavior. And the parent
Right.
is like, I can't contain it. I can't deal with it. And you were saying, like, as a teacher, that's exactly what you did. Like, there was some struggle, and instead of, either hammering them or hands off, it's okay, you actually took it as an opportunity to help them modulate it, learn from it. And the parents aren't doing
Yeah,
that.
got them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's I'm not a parent, so I can't say this for sure, but to me from the outside, it just kind of looks like laziness, but my guess is it's probably more a combination of not knowing, ignorance, maybe not knowing how to deal with a thing like that, and maybe a worry about the fact that everything's so transparent now. And what I mean by that is, no matter what you do, it's going to end up on some kind of social media. I can't imagine. It'd be tough to raise a kid right now, especially get those rough teenage years when they really need that container, like you're talking about. And you got to worry now: am I going to end up getting a call from Child Protective Services because I yelled at my kid over something that they did that they screwed up? So, I don't know. I can't. I'm just guessing when I tell you why that is. But uh, I've always said this from when I tell other teachers this, that the more aggressive you can be, the more repercussions you can give, I suppose, the better it is. As long as you don't get them to the point where they break, you need to,
Well,
we're
yeah.
bumpers, right? You got to tell them when they're doing it right, and you also have to tell them when they're doing it wrong, or else it's just going to fail. And I think some
Right.
parents don't want to do that.
Right. And then I do think that, but really, again, there's not a lot as far as, like, I didn't read a parent, this is how you parent. I really learned from actually becoming a therapist what my role was supposed to be the whole time, and then started to work with my children in that way. And it really
Mhm.
did help a lot more
So what
than
were the changes? What were the changes that you made as a result of doing that?
I think the change was, well, really becoming more emotionally aware of what my tendencies were, what I was avoiding, whether or not it was laziness. It was really, yeah, it could be like, I'm exhausted because all I do is work for, the dollar, and I don't have any energy to get you off your computer, to get you over here to do that, that
Sure.
kind of struggle. Right. So sometimes it is a matter of that, but sometimes it's a matter of an absent father, by the way. So a woman
Yep.
can't, I want to, I don't know, pivot this a little bit, because this is this
Sure.
weird thing that's happening, right? It's like, women have said, I want equal everything. And
Mhm.
so, and I've definitely taken on a lot, but it's seeming to have negated. Usually I say, if we understand one thing, it doesn't mean it negates everything else, but it's seeming to have negated the voice of the father. And now he's just off working, comes home and is quiet. They're not,
Yeah, that's
and
perfect.
the female doing too much.
Yeah, it's super common. I had another conversation with a woman who was a divorce coach, and she was very clear about that's what happens. So, mom gets wants to take on everything. So now I'm gonna be a career person too. You got career, family, or career, mother, wife. Okay,
Right.
and what she said was, you pick two, pick any two, but the third one's probably gonna suffer. And in most cases, that'll be your wife, right? So your wife duty. So Duty's the wrong word to say there, but you know what I mean.
Well,
So you're never going
yeah,
to turn your back on your kids.
the
Your career is
role.
pretty important, so you're going to keep riding with that. And yeah, so your husband is going to probably be the thing that maybe slides. And what I mean by slides is, hey, those conversations aren't happening. Those, hey, I need you to be more active as a woman. You're saying this to your husband. I need you to be more active in this. I need your help here. Because especially when the kids are young, it's not natural to a man, you know, to know exactly what to do and how to step in and help. You got to guide them a little bit. Now, as they get older, I mean, my research says this loud and clear. After the age of about 8 or 9, that's when you know, a father's role becomes. That's when the shift starts to happen, where the father's role becomes a lot more important. And especially in those teenage years, mom's role really drops in the background, and that's where dad has to be at the forefront, doing things like teaching delayed gratification and you know, more deep end of the pool stuff. Like, hey, let's go ahead and let them fail a little bit and see how they recover. Jordan Peterson likes to say that never interrupt anyone he says it like this: don't interrupt kids who are skateboarding. But he says it better, and when he says, you know, don't ever interrupt with kids when they're doing dangerous things carefully.
Yeah.
You know, the idea what you're going to learn again is
With,
how to fail there, and that's a dad's influence. And as he gets, well, whether he's absent physically or just, you know, presence wise, whether he's there and not talking, whatever. You know, I always tell dads, you can't blame anybody else for that. You know, it's your job to step up and be providing this type of dynamic and saying these words and supporting in these ways. And we're just in a situation now where, I don't know, yeah, I'm going to say it, it's going to be unpopular, but I think the feminist movement has become to a point where it's tripping on itself. It's turned into like a zero sum game where, in order for women to go up any higher, they got to push men down, and that hurts everybody. It just really does. I don't know. Did I step on your toes by saying that?
no, I see. But I think the way that we're thinking about this socially, as far as a belief system, as an ideology, like, I mean, I've studied feminism later in life in social psych, and I actually knew them to be a little bit more actually gay rights activists and wanting to be a little bit, I mean, and now they're pissed off at all a bunch of stuff going on. So
Sure.
I kind of think these movements in general have their time, and then they morph into
Sure.
next thing. And obviously I think that feminism has morphed into other, you know, other things over time than its original understanding of, like,
Yeah,
okay,
and it's the original version of it, the 60s and 70s, I would say up till the early 90s. How
yeah,
do you argue against equality for the sexes? Who in the hell's going to argue against that? You have to be an idiot. So, I mean, yeah, of course that's a good thing. There should be no glass ceilings for anyone. You know, why would you
right.
ever argue against that? I would never do that, of course. But what's happening now, like I said, this second, third, and even fourth wave, you know, that's just become a problem. It's too bad. You know, people just get extreme in their views and get behind a thing, and they believe what they believe, and
Yeah.
sadly, it doesn't help. I think it's a situation where a lot of times where you see this one problem, you're so focused on fixing it, then once you do, you don't realize that by fixing this, you created 7 or 8 other problems. You know what I mean? And it's just
Well,
being myopic.
well, yeah, and I think humans, like, I really find that we aren't really. I mean, you're a teacher, and so I want to, you know, also, I don't want to tread on you too much, but there's something
But
about that too for me. Is like, I find that I help people learn how to think in threes. Like, it's very bipolar. It's, if I want something, I have to bring you down. I'm identifying with the aggressor all the time, and so women have identified with their aggressor, and men have identified, and you know, and they're
yeah,
identified, and they're saying that. I find it like that's about as far as anybody's going. They're not necessarily taking it to the next step and going, wow, you know, my partner is a man, and therefore why would I be in this competition with them? What is this?
you're cutting off your nose to spite your face when you do that stuff. I don't care which direction it's going. You know, if you're a man and you decide you're going to be a woman hater or whatever it is, you can never be the best version of yourself without a good partner. You just can't be. I firmly believe that. I'm a single guy and I'm doing great and I enjoy my life, but there's things that I can't achieve on my own. Everything's easier when you have 4 hands instead of 2 and 2 brains instead of 1, right? And I think people, they just get past it. You know what I mean?
Right, if you can communicate. And I think that what I was talking about, I have a few comments coming in that we can definitely take a look at.
Good,
But,
good.
you know, I think that, you know, men and women, see, this is now the way that society has set us up as pitted against each other, competition, instead of looking as partnerships. And so, it does seem like, again, the way that women have come on board, it has tended to be more of an oppressive factor. And men are really been shamed for, again, their negativity, their aggression. And sure, to a certain extent, that's important to understand. Like, obviously, if it's abusive or they're hurting themselves, but I'm not talking. There's a huge spectrum that you use anger as an energy, or, wanting to work on work energy is considered aggression. Moving a heavy object, getting up out of bed. Women have it, men have it. And if you're suppressing it in a man and it becomes really active in the woman, man, you're going to get a lot of hardship.
That's an imbalance.
Right. And I find that young men even it is an imbalance. And they're also having to, mom stays in charge and dad recedes to the back, because
so common.
Right. And so the boys in that family don't get to really see a father represented in anything other.
That's an absent father.
Right, a passive aggressive way. So can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think that this is important, the absent father and the single mother, or even like an absent father in a family. Why is this? This is the phenomenon. Like there's a there's a retreat of sorts, even if they're in a relationship. So
there's this, from a base level, there's protect and provide, right? That's a thing that I think men have at their core. Most do, or they should. And unfortunately, there just aren't a lot of opportunities to do either. So, you don't live someplace where saber-toothed tigers or hyenas are going to come after your babies. I mean,
Right.
Nobody's going to take over your Kroger and kill your food supply. You know what I mean? Nobody's coming into your subdivision and threatening your family. So, your protect and provide roles are, they just kind of aren't there. So, there's a vacuum, right? So then you're like, well, what the heck am I supposed to do? And, for a young man, maybe you get involved in video games, because there's a place where you can really it's fake, but you can protect and provide and go do all these things. Let me grab a copy of my book real quick, because I've got
Yeah, go for it. You have the.
Yeah, it's right here behind me. I listed off the traits that are things that men are supposed to do. So we'll start with violent, chapter 2. All right.
Right.
Of course, I'm not saying that, go down to a bar every Friday night and find somebody to whoop on. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if the opportunity arises, you should be capable of doing that. And further, more than that, as recently as 200 years ago, and everything before that, you had to fight to live, to be able to eat, to get water, to reproduce. Violent conflict was part of us. And we are all descended from the winners. All right. So it's in your DNA to be able to violently take care of business if you have to. Now, we agree there's no real place to do that. It's not really needed. It's still in your DNA, though. So you've got to go find a way to bleed that off. You need to get into an MMA gym, or just have a heavy bag in the basement, or find something, so especially for boys. I mean, there's football and wrestling and boxing and all these different things that they could do to learn how to bleed that energy out, and then learn to control it, learn how to stop at the whistle, learn how to do all these things that, again, are just, they're genetic needs of ours. And I know it probably sounds like I'm not answering your question, but what I'm trying to say is this: there are so few places where we know as men, all right, we are doing what we're supposed to do. We're scratching our genetic itch. The people around us are happy with what we're doing. So this is the pocket. This is where I'm supposed to be. And absent that, you're kind of at a loss, and you just step back. Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. When I step in and give my opinion, sometimes I get stomped on. Sometimes she doesn't like it. And I tell guys this all the time. I talk about it in my book over and over again. Most of your masculinity is going to be that way. You're going to have to do it even in the face of people who disagree with you. Like, I give this example. So your kid's getting picked on. Kid's getting picked on at school, getting bullied, whatever, right? Well, mom's going to want to go down to the principal and get in his face and talk to the other boys' mother and do all this stuff that ultimately you're teaching your kid that his protection is not his own responsibility. Well, dad's response to that's going to be very different. He's going to say, "Come on down to the basement, get those hands up. Let me teach you some things." And now the boy's taking ownership of it. Now he's realizing, all right, there may be a time when I need to use my body to protect myself or someone else. And this will help me learn how and when to do that, and how to not use it when I don't need to, how not to get into road rage and do it when it's not appropriate, and all this stuff. And that's what's missing. There is no arena for men universally to express their manhood. And absent that, there's a purpose void. And again, that's why I wrote the book. I mean, hey, these are the things you're supposed to be doing, and I give you ideas in there. Here are different places where you can learn how to utilize these things where it's not going to be a negative thing. But most people
Yeah,
don't do it because it's not accepted by most people,
right. But I think that that does answer the question, is that when there is the purpose void, right? And nobody is taught they can do for themselves. Here, let me show you how you can do for yourself. You don't need
Yeah,
me to go run around and get your stuff and this, that. Do for yourself. Do for yourself. Like,
yeah.
boys learning this way too late or never learning it, right? And then it's this matter of learning it in your 20s. Man, that's a
It's
toughie,
too late.
but
It's really tough
right.
to do. Yeah.
It is tough, but I think that that's the thing. Like with your book, what I find is that men don't speak up for themselves. They stay locked in the purpose void, and they're not building the structure in between for themselves. Like I'm finding, like it's like, why don't I talk to my spouse if I know I feel like this is really bothering me, and
Yeah.
I'm going to continue to ignore myself and continue to be subservient to this. Why is that? And I'm like, I'm starting to figure out it's because you have no bridge. You're like, I'm saying, well, just go say it. Well, they're like, no, there's like, I'd be like
Well,
free fall if I did that.
but there's this other piece there that I think is unique to men, and that's that you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to make
Yeah.
waves. Yeah, I'm using these water things, but really it comes down to this. We don't want to ever be a burden. Okay, we want to protect and provide, and nowhere in that idea of providing is there
Uh,
someone else has got to take care of us. So when I come to you with problems, I'm going, here, take this burden from me. Do my job for me. I want you to provide for me. So that's very unnatural for a man. He doesn't want to do that. And that's why. That's it.
yeah.
And I tell him, I break through that. I tell guys this. Hey, when your wife needs the fridge moved, or needs her car worked on, or some other guy thing, you're excited as
Mhm.
hell to do it, right? You feel really good about helping her. It's just a cool thing that you get to do because you're providing for her, you're helping her, you're going to make her happy, all this stuff. You get fired up about it. And that's
Right.
great. Well, think about it this way. She's good at emotional stuff. So if you have an
Mhm.
emotional thing, you've got to find a good quality way to bring it to her so that she can have that same sense of satisfaction of helping you. Because she wants to. She's good at it. You know what I mean? She'll help
Right.
you with that stuff. So that's how I try to break through it. But saying it and doing it, sometimes two different
But
things. You know what I mean?
but I think there are, less. There's more fear and still like untrusting that person than not. But I think there are groups of people that are starting to emerge, both females that are much more open to providing that, that emotional connection and being able to be trusted, and him coming to her and he staying detached and frightened and far off and not connecting. And it's
Yep.
exciting for them to continue to, carry the fridge, because
Yeah.
when one person doesn't actually do the emotional work to cross that bridge within themselves, it's really problematic for the other person. What
No
do we
doubt.
suppose? We can't do the work for two. You can know that it's there. So yeah, I mean, but I think that there is something, again, about some amount of their masculinity still not being known, a sense of self, a confidence that does need to be cultivated before talking is, I can say, just do it. I mean, I think this is a kind of a multiple, like this is a very multidimensional, yeah,
For sure.
multifaceted type of thing.
Most
That
things are.
there's,
Yeah.
right, it's growth all over. And I think that that's why I think that it's not easy for me to say to a man, well, be emotional or say something about your emotions, when really I think their emotional language is different, right?
Definitely.
And right, but I think that that's where in some ways the rejection comes in, like, okay, oh, you're not expressing it. I think that there needs to be more of an understanding about where a man is coming in. And if he's not explaining it, I
Which is
just
very
think,
difficult to do because he probably doesn't understand it to start, very honestly. You know, I was having this
yeah,
conversation with Ryan Morrow, the guy who runs carnalmarriage.com. What he's selling is a program where he's teaching men how to keep their men who are in sexless marriages, teaching them
yeah,
how to make your wife want you all the time, right? And on the surface, Bianca, that seems so shallow, right? Oh, he just wants to have sex. But what's underneath that, that most men who are even going through this program don't understand, is what that sex represents is approval, validation. She thinks I'm good. She thinks I'm worthwhile. I'm doing my job. Things are going right. Like there's so many emotional pieces underneath it for a man, and most men have no idea that's what's going on. They just know that they feel better when they're doing it and after they've done it and when they're getting it regularly. You know, and
right,
sadly, I think women look at it from the outside and think it is just such a shallow thing, and it's not. It's ultimately, it's I look at it like here's our whole relationship is this mountain, right? Or like a hot fudge sundae, right? And
right,
sex is the cherry on top. I know that if that happens, everything else is in place, and I know I'm doing my job, and things are good. But you
yeah,
see what I'm saying? Most men don't know that. They're not going to be able to express that, right? And
mhm,
women, of course, aren't going to see it either. He's just going to know that he wants to have sex, right? That's
right.
it.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely right. I find that women tend to feel like sex is more emotional to them, and they don't recognize how it is for men as well, how emotional it is, especially in a committed relationship.
For sure, in a
So
committed relationship.
right, that there is, that's like really a point of connection. And in being physical, we talked about this one too before.
Mhm.
That's the point. Even with fathers, it's again, rough and tumble play, being
Yeah, I've
hands
got
on
that right
with
now.
your kid.
Yeah. Yep.
Even like, right, the idea of, even with your infants get to know their father as handling them more roughly, not going
Yep.
to drop them, but handling them, with a little bit more of a grip. And so this is all being symbolized very early on. But if they're afraid, or they're not, embodying themselves, I really think, and just constantly like worrying about whether or not they're doing it right. You know what? You're doing it right. We're all
Yeah.
worried.
Think about what the microcosm that represents, right? So dad's a little bit rougher with this infant, and so that, of course, like you said, their psyches are absolutely malleable at that point. So they're learning, all right, dad's a little rougher with me,
Mhm.
very physically, and that's it. That's all I got right at this point. Well,
Right.
as time passes, they get into those teen years, dad's going to be a little rougher with them emotionally, a little rougher with them mentally. And what they're going to do, they're going to toughen up a little bit. They're going to learn some delayed gratification. They're going to learn how to fail. That's how it works. And you need both. I'm always this proponent for bringing dads back into relationships and bringing husbands back into marriages and all of that. But I don't mention enough. Of course, moms are incredibly important. You have to have both. You got to have both. But nobody's
Right.
really supporting the dad side, so that's kind of
Yeah.
my angle. But
Yeah.
yeah,
We're,
we're
we're
on the same
talking
team on
about
that one.
that. Right, we're talking about that though, and I think, saying like it's time to educate yourselves, as far as reading a book, figuring this out, starting to really take, manhood seriously, so you can represent, all the roles that we're asked to play. I think in a way that is more authentic to you. Again, not
Yeah,
based on what society has said, not based on what even your parents did. I mean, who are you? And starting to identify with that in some way that makes sense, that feels empowering, that and and so I actually kind of want to ask you too, like, are there activities, I know for boys, playing sports huge, but what about when you're I mean, like in certain things that they can do, but even when you're a man and you're like, okay, I want to do this now, like what are some of the things that you suggest if you're finding this out like later in life?
anything physical, right? I mean, as you said,
Mhm.
that's kind of a defining mark of men, whether it's the idea that we're physically stronger in general. I mean, almost always, right? Um, or
Right.
handle how we handle that baby. All these things are rougher and tougher, right, about men. So, one of the things that I do, very frankly, to get that out is I cut firewood. I'm up at my place here now, and nothing makes me feel better than getting out there and running my chainsaw, dropping some standing dead lumber, bucking it, taking it over to my splitter and splitting it all and then stacking it. Like, I'm getting beat up a little bit, getting some bruises on me, and I love that. It's just the coolest thing. And it's
Right.
again, it's a genetic need for men. So that's just one example. I mean, you can do, you name it, anything that might be a little bit physical. You know, getting into, obviously, working out is I think the most accessible one. But if you have a physical job, that's awesome. You know, like I run a construction crew, and I like to get in there with the guys and work. I like to swing a hammer. I like to move boards around. I like to do that stuff. And that's a way, if you, like you said, if you're finding this late, if you're in your 20s and you're reading through my book and you're like, well, how the heck am I gonna, learn how to do this stuff? Well, number one,
Yeah.
be around other people who can teach you how. Number two, do some physical things. You'll be surprised how different you feel. You'll feel good at a genetic gut level. It won't be so much in your brain. You'll just know that you'll have accomplished something, and you'll feel good at your core. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. I think that this is one of those things that I was even kind of talking about today, is that a lot of times men have had to give up their interest for what everybody else wants. And
Super
I
common.
think this is
Yeah.
right. And they lose a sense of self. Now you're talking about things that, maybe in your environment, those are activities that you used to do when you're younger, but
Mhm.
anything, it sounds like, physical that you can do with your hands, but you need to rediscover yourself. You need to
No doubt.
stop putting your on the back burner and wondering if somebody's going to get mad if you go and say, I need to take some time to,
Shoot
figure
some
this out.
hoops.
Not
Yeah.
right. Shoot some. I'm not trying to get away from you. I'm trying to explore myself. And it is a subtle, and it is empowering. It's not some sort of, somebody said this the other day, it's like, it's not exhilarating to get better. I'm like, yes, it's not
No,
mania.
slow.
Right?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not doing this anymore. It's a consistent feeling of self-assurance. It's a lot of deeper feelings that I think are much longer lasting.
Well, and you get, I understand the drawback. I've got a lot of buddies who have families, and I've got one in particular who, I mean, he puts all of his time into his family. Not a bad thing, because again, we talked about this, the compensating from what you think your parents did. So he thought his parents weren't active enough, so he's over. Anyway, I always tell him
Yeah.
this, hey, one of the things that you need to be able to do, you've got to role model what it is to be a happy adult. You know what I mean? You have to have some hobbies. You have to have some buddies. You've got to have some things that you do. Otherwise, you're teaching your kids that their whole life is going to be their kids. And then when their kids leave home, what do you got left? Like, you got to demonstrate that. That's part of good parenting is, on a Friday night, go out on a date night with your wife and leave the kids with a sitter. Or, hey, a couple times a year I go up north with my buddies. Or, hey, my friends are over and we're having a party, and we're gonna demonstrate responsible drinking. We're gonna have just a couple, and it's only when things are positive, only when we're happy. Nobody's drinking when they're angry. Nobody gets angry when they're drinking. Stuff like that. You have to be able to role model how to be an adult, and
Yeah.
so many people overcompensate past it, and they miss that piece.
Yeah, I think that was really true, that there is something about what kind of, they ask themselves, what kind of parent am I going to be? And it's going to be the opposite of my parent. Unfortunately, I
Yeah.
always tell people then that's actually the same thing.
Yep.
Both can end up just as detrimental. So
Oh,
say
no
if
doubt
you're
about it.
very right neglecting, then if you're super attentive, they actually equal the same thing psychologically.
No
When
doubt.
I them, in their 20s or 30s, they're going to both have something very similar as a problem, because they never really got the attention or the time to develop themselves or see something and explore their imagination, as far as what does this mean for me. But as far as a man also, I think being a little bit more intentional about, especially if he has boys, like, what is this going to look like for me? What's my plan with them? And,
Mm.
is there something of a tradition? Like, is there a rite of passage that you can create? It's
Yeah.
right. That it's something like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I let the boys twice a year, but maybe, that's going to be you one day too. I mean, can
Yeah.
they do
So
something like that reasonably?
I love that you brought up the rite of passage thing. I think that would solve a lot of things. All right. First of all, some of the basic things that men need. Uh, we've got being honorable is one of them.
Right.
Being honest, being loyal. Um, you're not going to know that unless you see it, right? You've got to see it. And I think that there is no, us not having this rite of passage, us not having this idea that so many cultures have had forever, means that the expectations of you as a boy are what you're going to, as we said earlier, what you're going to be expected to do when you're older. And the way that I see this happening is this, and again, I just did a show with a guy about this specifically.
Okay.
It should be very local. It should be very familial, right? So I would get
Okay.
together with my brother-in-laws, and we've got a nephew who's hitting 13 or 14 or whatever age you decide, and we decide as the elder men of the group, how are we going to impart onto this young man that at a certain point we're going to have different expectations of you, and that should be by family. I mean, you should be looking at talking to each other like, hey man, here are the things that we think a man should be. So how we're all teaching it to him because he's seeing us do it. We're doing that part right. But at some point, whether it's the day they graduate from high school, the day they turn 18, I think it should be earlier than that, 14 or 15.
Yeah.
Hey man, from at this point, we're gonna be a little more hands off, and we're gonna treat you differently. We're gonna let you go out there. Maybe you'll fail, maybe you won't. We'll be here if you we'll be here for guidance if you do. If you don't, great, but hopefully you do. And
Yeah.
these are the things we expect of you. And there should be some sort of a ceremony is the wrong word because it sounds so hokey, but there's got to be a thing, whether it's as aggressive as a family tattoo or a brand or a thing where, all right, here's this, I'm going to hand down grandpa's pistol or something like that, where there's an actual physical, I can see it, touch it, feel it, where I know now I'm not the same person I was. I'm giving up my boyish ways, and I'm focusing on being a good man from this point forward. It's been told to me by men I respect. I've got people here to support me, and that's the route I'm going to take. And these are the rules, and I'm going to follow them. And I know if I don't, there's going to be certain repercussions, and that's that. That's how a rite of passage should be. It should be very open, very verbal, very transparent. Hey, young man, this is what we're doing right now. This is what's expected of you. And boys will acquiesce. They will. I mean, think about it. When you were 15, what was the only thing you could think about? Turning 16 and getting a driver's license. When you were 17, what's the only thing you could think about?
Right.
Turning 18 so you could be an adult. When you were 20, the only thing on your mind was turning 21. So all these kids are good, boys especially, they're gonna love it. Oh, now I'm a man. Now I'm a man. You know what I mean? That's how it ought to be. There isn't anything like that anywhere. I mean, and it's a shame. And you're seeing the back end of that. You're seeing what happens.
Yeah, and I didn't recognize as much, right, until you were talking, how much that is absent, missing. And when it's absent and missing, what happens is you stay pretty much this kind of, again, it's not even just Peter Pan. You stay kind of in this cognitive space where nothing's defined, where,
Yep.
you're just like, okay, well, I guess I go to
You don't
work,
know
I
your
go
role.
to school, just the role. And I think religion sometimes maybe kind of take, like, if boys are really confused, like, oh, follow me, which is, I'm not going to necessarily go there, but that's not what this is. And this is much more, this is about you and your maturity and handing it over to you and saying, and that is really going to activate something in them physically, emotionally, and cognitively. That would activate something for them to start to build on, because then there is a kind of a tempering of it. Like if he becomes, oh, I'm a man, and he's just like,
Oh, you're gonna screw it up at first. Yeah, of course.
right, you can say it without being it, and then it's time for you to
Yep.
temper it, to mold it somewhat, to help them understand what it really takes. But now they're thinking, I want to be, so that responsibility makes sense, and this accountability makes sense, and communicating makes sense in this way. Women, and I didn't think, this is my kind of realization, when they have a baby, their hormones change, their bodies change, they
Yep.
embody womanhood.
Yep. No
That
doubt.
is this kind of strange. I remember it myself because I was 23. I was like, wow, I'm a different person from before as I was after. I mean, clearly I was very young. So, right,
There's
there
nothing
was
like that for men.
there was nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
so then, being with somebody that hadn't gone through this thing I just went through,
Now you're looking at him going, why
pretty
aren't you
much,
keeping up? Why aren't you keeping up?
Right, why don't you have a baby?
Yeah.
No, but I don't, that's not even necessary. What it is more that that is something that, maybe where the split is happening.
Oh, no
And
doubt. Absolutely.
right, and men, I think men have to really take seriously if they have boys,
Yeah.
that this is totally changeable. I don't really think this is beyond our
Oh, no doubt.
capacity to
No doubt.
transform.
I just released a show called The Adjustability of Man. And what I talk
Okay.
about specifically in there is that men are forever able to be taught as long as it's the source that's teaching you is one that you respect and
Mhm.
hopefully admire and like. Uh, Men's behaviors are super easy to adjust. I mean, outside of being a drug addict or something like that, there's something different going on there. But as long as you use your guidance right, and actually, part of what inspired me to do that show was one of your TikToks where and I talk about it in the show where
Oh,
you
good.
this man he's doing the dishes, and
I-
every time he puts the cup there, he puts it upside down or whatever, and you come over. You remember what I'm talking about, right?
yeah,
Yeah, and so I talk about that. I tell women, hey, this is great news for you. If you use rather than doing it that way, coming up and lighting him up, then he's going to go, well, I'm trying to help her out and I'm getting nothing but negative for this. I'm going to recess into the background and I'm not going to, I'm going to pull away. But if you come up, and pat him on the ass and kiss him on the cheek and say, hey, I really appreciate you doing this. Hey, do the and pat him on the ass and kiss him on the cheek and say, hey, I really appreciate you doing this. Hey, do the cups this way. I helped her. She's happy. I got what I wanted. She got he's going to help you a ton more. Same exact situation. And the way that you address that, and I'm not trying to make men out like they're children. I just mean that you do have some power there. You have some control. You have some things that you could do that's going to make everybody happier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, I think the way that women are dealing with it now in a very codependent way is incredibly parental, is judgmental. I mean, parents all the time yell at kids instead of explain to them what to
Yeah.
do. I mean, cleaning is a ridiculously aggressive activity. Like,
That's what
we're
I love
American.
how you said that. That's very true. It's ridiculously aggressive.
I have no idea. I even did a live earlier this week where all we were talking about was chores. And now I know. I mean, I realize I lived it. I understand it. But I didn't realize it was, doing this work now, how universal this experience is. But absolutely, there's so much about what is happening now with the control and talking down that is really, derogatory type of parenting situation, not a positive one.
Yeah.
But a lot of parents wouldn't ever use a technique where you would actually touch and love someone when they're helping you, and then suggest. They're going to be a lot
Yeah.
more
And
hands
I don't
off.
want to that's not on women at all. I mean, I'm just giving that because I try to, I'm trying to educate everyone about men,
Yeah,
right? That's my job. But, I'm always telling men, hey, that's a situation where if she comes and she does it the wrong way, right? She lights you up. You need to be able to go over to her and say, hey, listen, here's how I feel when you do that. But if you did it this other way, I mean, things would go totally differently. And
yeah,
most men aren't going to do that. That's where the block comes in, and that's a block I'm trying to get guys past. Like, hey, you need to, like, the second to last chapter is called generous, and what I talk about specifically in there is how to really communicate and give your love in every way that you possibly can, and support your wife and support your family, support the people around you. You're a leader at all times. Do that well and be very generous with your time and with your support. Right?
right.
You have to be able to do that. It's incredibly important to being a man. And the chapter on honesty, um, I spent that whole chapter talking about how you need to be honest with yourself, my man. You have
Right.
to think about, why am I feeling this way? What's going on in my head? Get that all figured out. Maybe talk to one of your buddies and then go to her and say, all right, very clearly, I need this, and I feel like this when you do that. And if you don't figure it out first, you're just going to dump it on her, and now you got to fight and you look like a dick and nobody wins, right?
Right. Yeah, you have to do the planning first. I have a and I think I have a master class that's free because I just think that nobody has any sort of, strategy for communication ever taught to them. And it really
Very
is,
few people, yeah.
make sure that I mean, when do we learn this? It's like, okay, this should be 101, even within group dynamics, but it's like, it is about understanding yourself emotionally and doing that work. If you can't do that work, actually having the conversation is going to just
Yeah,
reinforce your
it's going to be a
defense.
problem. Yeah.
or make it about somebody else's, make it somebody else's problem. It's like, do your homework, be ready for their defenses, but don't shut down, have some boundaries ready and things like that. So there's ways to prep that actually almost ensure success, as long as your expectations are set that I don't need to go tell them one time. And women keep saying, I tell them a million times. So I'm like, well, if you keep doing something, even in my field, if I keep saying the same interpretation over and over, and the problem isn't resolved, like by understanding, then I'm
Yeah.
off. I don't just keep
Yeah.
doing it. I stop and wonder
Right.
what's going on here. So being curious, and the motivation being love, emotional honesty is huge. If really
Huge.
you've gone
Huge.
too far south of
No
being
doubt.
able to touch one another or love one another, or have empathy, now everything needs to really be reevaluated. And that's just a really difficult time, folks. I mean, like, just in general, to ever address something from. Like,
Yeah,
start
for sure.
immediately. Don't
So
wait.
I have a question here from one of my people. I've got a ton,
Yeah.
but this is the only one that I really like. She wants to ask you, what's the most common mistake that men make in relationships? What's the most common mistake?
Um, I'm going to say going into a relationship with a romantic fantasy of who they are without doing the work first. Of who, not
Who
who,
the man is himself.
yeah, who she is, what they're going to be, kind of this end game idea of what this is going to be about. It's not based. What I find is men go into this with kind of maybe even the same as what women do. Again, a romantic fantasy of, oh, she seems attractive, nice, little younger,
She likes me.
she likes me. I think she's going to
Yeah.
love me. She's kind of looking up to me. This is one of the things that I find that men are like, but didn't realize that person, and kind of allows, if the woman is controlling too, allows them to kind of be pulled into that relationship without ever really, I think, taking inventory about who they are as people, what their relationship values are, which a lot of men that end relationships, or women, I mean, whatever, they come out and they go, wow, that'll never happen again. That'll never happen again. Okay, well,
Mhm.
what about that not happening to begin with? And doing a
Yeah.
little more research about,
So how do you do that? What's the best way to do it if you're a young man and
mhm.
you're thinking about getting into this serious relationship? How do you do that? How do you take that inventory? I know how to do it, but what would you say
Yeah.
to that guy?
That's right. I mean, taking your inventory is, I think, also finding out like what is valuable to you as far as feeling related to, and how you're going to show up in a relationship. Forget all the ideas of like where this is going or what's going to go on. Can you get to know a person? Because, like, again, this is what's most important, is two people connecting, not two people getting together to be a couple so they're not lonely and feel good about each other because they have another, and then, okay,
Right.
well, if it's working out, have kids. Like, there's
That's
just
how it goes, right?
yeah. And men often, that's another huge mistake. Men often think, well, if I just give her a baby, she'll be happy.
Oh
Sorry.
man, I made that mistake of thinking as long as if I get, things will be different after we get married. And I watched all these older guys just shake their heads and laugh at me when I'd say that, and I know now exactly what they were thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Keep on escalating. Men think that escalating makes the problem better, but the problem just gets bigger. So
Yeah.
I think that that's because of again, beliefs, ideas, what it is that they can offer at a higher level might be valued more. They'll finally see my worth when I can give them this thing that they're wanting. And if
Mhm.
they don't see it at this level, folks, it ain't gonna work out. You got to meet each
Yeah.
other in a good place and stay there for quite some time. I
Yeah.
think getting to know someone, I know some people, over 2 years, don't overcommit to somebody without going through what we call like stages of a relationship, which you
Yeah, I
have
would
to go
agree.
through.
You, you better see at least I always say at least every holiday once, preferably twice.
Yeah, yeah. So that's if that is, that time is taken and the relationship goes through all the stages and you're both still communicating and growing together, then yeah, you probably found a winner, you know, somebody that you can really spend time with, and that's what's fulfilling. So, I mean, and then, you know, again, because this is the kind of, I think, relationship building in the beginning is exactly what's going to need to happen when you have children. That's a whole
Yeah.
nother, but again, growth process.
Yeah, like I said, I can't speak directly to the having kids, but most of the people that I talk to will tell me, again, professionals will say that right around middle school, it seems like that's when she gets exhausted because she's been doing it all, and she wants to leave, and he's like, "What? What? Things just got easier. They're kind of on their own now a little bit." That's usually what happens.
Yeah, and it's such a pattern that I think in some ways now we're at least, I think, dawning the emotional awareness phase, or, you know, something about like, hey guys, I know we can't catch what's already been done, but man, anybody can learn this material now and not have to fall into the same trap,
So
because
how
there
can
is, yeah.
go ahead, finish what you were gonna say.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, yeah. And then I think to finish up too, because there is a way of holding yourself accountable. There are resources. There's your book. There's actually rites of passage camps. I looked up and
That's
saw,
true.
you
That's true.
you know,
Yep.
like where you can get into this kind of in, you know, any phase in your life. So I do think there are resources out there. I think there are ways to start to kind of really get involved with your own personal development in a very specific way, not just a general, like motivational way, but in a way that helps you develop yourself as a man.
Yeah, and it's about, like you said, figuring out who you are. Motivation is by nature extremely short-lived.
Yeah.
You get somebody real fired up for about 20 minutes or until the next chapter comes out or whatever. Motivation is super overrated. But yeah, to actually have a rite of passage would be huge. I think one of the very few left is the military. There are military families. I'll know once you come back from doing your tours or whatever you did, I'm going to look
Mhm.
at you differently, and
Yeah.
you're going to act differently, and things are going to be very different after that. But you can't leave it up to the government to, not everybody goes to the military. You know what I mean? That's why I like the familial aspect of it.
Yeah, I think your strategy, I think that makes so much sense. And it's very powerful, very potent. If men
Nice.
could take that seriously, I think that we'd see a shift.
I
And
think we would too. It would make a big difference, but we'll see. I mean, how do you make that change? I mean, I've created the water, and I'm trying to
yeah.
lead them to it, but they've got to decide they want to drink, right? That's how that goes. So you said, you mentioned earlier you had a couple other questions that came up. Was there anything that you liked from the questions that you're getting?
I don't know if they're still on. This was a little bit earlier, and I had put out a video, and I think that we answered them. I tried to kind of integrate them with
Good.
what it is. But
You're good
yes,
at
and
that.
yeah, and if anybody has any suggestions about, oh, what is it? Okay, my wife wants a divorce because she says I'm a codependent on her over the years. What can I do? What would you say to that?
Oh man, I would tell you this. If you haven't, there are resources out there for you. I mentioned earlier Ryan Morrow from carnalmarriage.com. Uh, Ultimately, what he's going to tell you, I'm going to tell you right now, and that's this. You've got to work on yourself, brother. You've got to get back to who you were. It isn't that she's not attracted to you anymore. It's that you aren't doing things to attract her. You've got to get yourself back. You've got to get your life back. And that doesn't mean you go out and start dating and turn your back on everybody. No, it could be some small stuff. I mean, that's why I wrote the book. I mean, every one of these chapters are things you can do. Chapter 1 is physically fit. Get yourself back in shape, brother. You know what I mean? Do that. How's she not going to be more attracted to you? And it's going to add a little mystery. She's like, oh, he's working out. What, do I need to worry here? A little bit of that is healthy. Figure out yourself. Go do a little therapy on your own. And I would tell you, all the stuff that you do is very important. Don't tell her you're doing it. Just do it. Go do the stuff. Don't say, hey, this is my strategy and I'm going to win you back. Nothing like that. Just start going and getting yourself back, getting yourself right. And I mean, if things go bad, which I hope they don't, you'll be in better shape at that point to move forward if should you need to do it. But I'm telling you, in the meantime, if you handle your business right and handle yourself right, and don't be so passive and don't be so reactive and be more proactive in your relationship, she's probably gonna want to stick around, man. You're a high value man. Know it. Be it.
Right. I
That's it.
completely agree. I mean, and I think, yeah, do not look for approval. You know,
No, at
if
all.
this is the thing that she's calling you and saying, there are just absolutely ways to start to emotionally develop through therapy or through your own, the books that you can read, and
Yep.
also going forward to developing yourself as a man. So, and just, too, I think she needs to have some empathy for the growth process, though, and it's not for her, it's for you, and hopefully
Mm.
yeah, and if that's the case, if doing therapy, doing it for yourself and not doing it for her and moving on, therapy, doing it for yourself and not doing it for her and moving on, people will make it first. I want it, you're quick, then I want out. You know what, to get out then, because if they're already just throwing excuses at you, fine, it's like, bye.
Yeah, and if you got to be consistent with it, whatever you're gonna do,
Yeah.
stick with it. Because at first she's gonna resist it, man. If you're working out, all of a sudden she notices you're starting to look pretty good. Start expecting some real shitty foods in the fridge. She's gonna start baking cakes and stuff like that, because a part of her is gonna not know how to handle it. My point is that, like I mentioned earlier, we talked about how masculinity is a thing where a lot of people don't understand it, and you got to do it even if they don't, right? Like you're teaching your kid how to defend himself in the basement. Mom's not going to understand that. How can she? She's a woman. You're a man. You can't understand what it's like to grow a baby inside you. You can't. You're a man. She can. She gets that. So there are things that, right, you're going to get, she's going to get. She's not going to understand, but that doesn't mean you don't do it just because she doesn't approve. You still do it.
Yeah, and I think that most, healthy couples will absolutely appreciate what the other can give that they can't, and have empathy for,
No doubt.
anything they don't understand. So, find partners, that absolutely share those values. And I appreciate you coming on board. I think that
I love talking to you, Bianca. It's so much fun. I enjoy it every time.
I know. We'll have to do it again and come up with a topic.
Absolutely.
If you think of something, let me know.
I will. I'll shoot you. I know how to get a hold of you. I'll shoot you something out there. And you guys buy my book. I do all this stuff for free. It's the only way I make any money.
Yeah.
Buy my book. It's on Amazon. You can get the ebook too.
Yeah, everybody's looking for solutions, answers. There's the book.
I got one. Yep, I've got one.
All you have to do is read it and start implementing these things, and all the stuff we're talking about gets easier. So,
no doubt.
natural process. Well, I'll see you again. Thank you, everybody.